I was just driving to drop off a casserole. That's it. Nothing dramatic, just leftover lasagna and a polite visit to my son's family. I had no intention of stopping, but when I saw my husband's car in the driveway of my daughter-in-law's house, a sick feeling settled in my stomach. He wasn't supposed to be there. We don't even live in that neighborhood. At first, I thought, maybe there was an emergency. Maybe he's helping with the kids. But the blinds were half open, and I saw them in the kitchen, laughing. My husband and my daughter-in-law, side by side, no kids in sight, 2 wine glasses on the counter, a plate of charcuterie like it was some kind of date night. I got out of the car, my hands were cold, but I didn't even feel it. I walked up to the window, careful not to step on the gravel. I don't even know why. Curiosity? Instinct? Stupidity? And then I heard it. His voice. Once the paperwork goes through, she won't even know. Laughter. She signs anything after those meds. She's still foggy from the surgery, right? I froze. They were talking about me, about my recovery, about some kind of paperwork I had apparently signed. Then she said it. She'll be out of the picture soon. The house, the pension, everything. It'll be ours. Ours. My heart felt like it was being crushed from the inside out. And when they clinked their glasses, to freedom, he said, to inheritance, she replied, I felt the blood drain from my face. I stepped back and nearly tripped over a flower pot I'd helped her place last spring. I'd bent over, pregnant belly and all, to help her plant tulips she picked out on Pinterest. She'd called me Mom that day. And now I was a problem to remove. I grabbed my phone and hit record. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew I'd need proof, because if I didn't have something real, they'd make me think I imagined it. Right before I walked away, she said the last thing I'll never forget. Once the house is in my name, we won't need her. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just kept recording. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew I should leave, run, scream, anything, but my feet stayed planted because I needed to hear everything. I needed evidence of how deep this betrayal ran. That's when he said it. She signed the documents, didn't she? My husband asked. She doesn't remember signing them, she replied. She was still loopy from the anesthesia, but yeah, it's done. He laughed. I told you that was the perfect time. She just had her gallbladder out. Probably thought she was signing discharge papers. My stomach flipped. My surgery had been 2 months ago. He picked me up from the hospital, helped me walk to bed. He brought me soup that night, tucked the blanket around my legs, and the whole time, he was using my recovery to get my signature. She gave me power of attorney, she whispered. And you got her to sign the will. That's enough. That house is worth over $800K, he said. We sit tight, let her keep thinking everything's normal. And then, boom. When she pushes back, we show her the signatures. What's she gonna do? Sue us? They both laughed again. I felt something twist behind my ribs. Not grief, not anger. Something colder. I finally stepped away from the window. I moved fast, quiet, got into my car with my hands still trembling. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared out the windshield like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. I played the recording 3 times in my driveway. Each time, I caught a new detail. Her voice was smug. His tone was cruel. And I had been asleep, sedated, recovering from a surgery I didn't even want. And while I was fighting nausea and stitches, they were stealing my life with a pen. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my kitchen, lights off, listening to the recording over and over with headphones, like a secret, like a murder confession. Because that's what it felt like, a murder of everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my family, my home. At 2:14 a.m., I started pulling out every legal document I had, deed to the house, power of attorney forms, wills, bank statements, old tax returns, anything with a signature. I spread them across the dining table and searched for anything I didn't remember signing, and there it was. A scanned power of attorney document, dated March 22nd, 1 day after my surgery. My signature was on it. Except it wasn't. It looked like my handwriting, but off. A slight tilt in the M of my name, the way I don't loop the bottom of my G. My hand was probably shaking from the meds, or maybe someone else signed it for me. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. I didn't even shower. Just brushed my hair back, shoved the file folder into my purse, and drove. I sat in the waiting room, staring at my name printed on documents I didn't remember touching. When the lawyer called me in, I didn't even sit down right away. I handed him the folder and said one thing. I think my husband and daughter-in-law forged my signature while I was sedated. His face didn't change. Just opened the folder, scanned the documents, and nodded slowly. We'll run a forensic signature analysis, he said. But from what I see here, they've been planning this for a while. I asked him what happens if it's proven fake, if the power of attorney and will are invalid. He paused. Then legally, they have no control over your assets, he said, but you'll have to fight it, and they'll fight back. Before I left, I played the recording. Just a few seconds. Enough for him to hear the words, "She won't even remember signing it." He looked up at me and said, "Keep that file safe, and do not, let them know you know." I nodded once. My hands were still shaking. But inside? Something else had woken up. I wasn't confused anymore. I was going to war. I left the lawyer's office and drove straight home. Not because I felt ready, but because I needed answers. Real ones. Tangible ones. Not memories blurred by medication or gut feelings in the dark. I needed proof. I walked in the front door and didn't even take off my coat. I went straight to the cabinet in the hallway. Bottom drawer, old files, things I hadn't touched in years. I pulled them all out and dropped them on the dining room table. I didn't eat. I didn't sit. I didn't even notice it was raining until the thunder cracked so loud I flinched. For the next 4 hours, I went page by page through every form I'd ever signed. Some still smelled faintly like the old ink toner Harold used to swear by. I found our original home deed, our first joint bank application, the updated will we made the year after our son got married. Everything was where it should be, until it wasn't. Midway through a manila envelope labeled Estate 2021, I found it. A grant transfer form. A document authorizing full ownership of our home and assets transferred to a third party, in this case, her, my daughter-in-law's name, in bold, on my deed. And there, right under the line for current legal owner, was my name, my signature. Except I never signed that page in my life. It wasn't just forged, it was studied. I could tell. The same curl in the G, the same half-looped R I've used since Catholic school. But the pressure was wrong, the pen stroke too deliberate, almost traced. It was perfect in a way that real handwriting never is. They didn't just guess how I'd sign, they'd practiced, copied. Or worse, they had watched me sign other things and replicated it. I stood up so fast my chair screeched across the floor. My chest was tight, my head was swimming. And for the first time since I heard them through that window, I felt something heavier than fear. Violation. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd tried to erase me. Quietly. Legally. Permanently. I picked up the phone and called the lawyer back. He answered on the second ring. "I found it," I said. "Found what?" "The house transfer form. With my forged signature. It's not even subtle. They filed it like I just handed over my life like it meant nothing." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said the thing I didn't want to hear. "We need to check county records. If it's already filed, that means it's official. On paper, you may no longer legally own your home." I sat down, slowly, like my knees had forgotten how to work. I could hear the rain picking up outside, tapping against the windows like it was trying to echo the panic rising in my throat. I pulled up the county website and started digging. 3 clicks in, I saw it. Transfer of ownership. Filed March 25th, 2 days after my surgery. 3 days after I couldn't keep down water. 4 days after my husband told me I was too foggy to make decisions and should just rest. My name was still on the records, but marked as prior owner. And there, in bold, new owner, Lucy Taylor, her, my daughter-in-law, She owned the house. My house. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen like it might blink and correct itself. I had lived in that home for 27 years, raised 2 children there, buried my husband's ashes beneath the oak tree in the backyard, hosted every Thanksgiving since 1994. It was mine. But not anymore. She had it. Legally. Quietly. Cleanly. And no one, not even my own children, had said a word. The lawyer called back an hour later with confirmation. "It's filed," he said. "And worse, it looks like they filed a revised will too." Meaning? Meaning, as far as the state's concerned, your estate isn't yours anymore. That's when it hit me. They weren't waiting to push me out. They already had. All that was left was the performance, pretending I still belonged, pretending I was still useful until they didn't need me to be. I hung up the phone and sat in the dark. Just me, the fake signature, and the real feeling that everything I thought I knew had been a carefully constructed lie. But if they thought I'd go quietly, they didn't know me at all. The envelope was taped to my front door. That's how I knew they were done pretending. I had just come home from the lawyer's office. I was tired, holding a coffee that had gone cold in my hand, and there it was. White envelope, taped right under the house numbers like some twisted welcome mat. I didn't even have to open it. I knew. Still, I peeled it off, hands shaking, and stepped inside. Sat down at the dining table where I used to host Sunday dinners, and unfolded the paper like I was unwrapping a weapon. Notice to vacate. Issued by the new legal property holder, Lucy Taylor. They gave me 30 days. No phone call, no conversation, no human decency. Just a deadline, and the assumption I'd walk away from my life without protest. And like clockwork, 10 minutes later he called. My husband. "Hey," he said, voice soft like a man calling from a hospital waiting room. "I heard you got the notice." He heard, like he hadn't helped draft it. "Can we talk?" he asked. I didn't say yes. But 10 minutes later, his car pulled into the driveway anyway, the same car I saw parked outside her house. The same one I used to wash every Saturday while he napped on the couch. He walked in like he still had the right to. No knock. Just turned the knob and stepped inside. The audacity didn't surprise me anymore. He sat across from me, folded his hands, and did the thing he always did when he was trying to manipulate the outcome. Tilted his head, softened his voice, pretended to be reasonable. "I know this feels sudden," he said, "but it's just temporary. Things have gotten messy. Maybe if you move into that little apartment near the lake, things can calm down. We can all take a breather." He smiled, like this was a favor, like he was doing me a kindness by offering me exile. "You want me to leave my home?" I said. "It's not about ownership," he replied. "It's about peace. Lucy's under a lot of pressure." "Lucy?" I cut him off. "Lucy is the one who filed this. She's just trying to protect her future. I mean, with the house and the will, with the will that you both forged, while I was unconscious." He didn't flinch, just pressed his fingers together like a man in prayer. "There's no proof of that," he said. I almost laughed. The man didn't even blink while telling his wife she had no proof of being robbed. I stood up, walked to the drawer, and pulled out the printed audio transcript, the one I'd started annotating. I dropped it on the table in front of him. "Every word," I said. "From the window. I recorded everything." He glanced at the pages but didn't touch them. He just leaned back, lips twitching like he wanted to smirk but didn't quite dare. Then he stood up. "I'm trying to make this easy, Margaret. You don't want this to get ugly." I stared at the man I had married 34 years ago. The man who once held our newborn son with shaking hands. The man who cried when my mother died. The man who now wanted me gone so he could keep playing house with her. He turned to walk out but paused at the door. "It's best for everyone if you just go quietly." That line. It hit different. Like I was being erased not just from a house, but from a life. From my life. I waited until I heard his car pull away. Then I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. "I just got the eviction notice," I said, and he showed up here to make it sound polite. There was a pause on the other end. "You need to start preparing to fight this," he said. "Do you still have the insurance documents you mentioned last week? The joint policy?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Find it. Bring it in. If we're lucky, it might be enough to challenge the power of attorney and freeze the transfer. But we need something concrete. I ended the call and walked to the filing cabinet again. I had searched it once. Now I'd search it like my life depended on it. Because it did. I spent the entire night on the living room floor, buried under old folders and receipt envelopes, hunting for anything they missed. The clock hit 3 a.m. before I found it. A crumpled envelope from 8 years ago, shoved in the back of a drawer I hadn't touched in ages. Inside, an old insurance policy in both our names, joint ownership, full survivorship rights. No mention of transfer, no mention of reassignment. It was legally binding. I stared at the paper like it was a lifeline. Because it was. It contradicted the forged power of attorney. If I could prove this policy was still valid, that he never removed me legally, it might unravel their plan. Or at the very least, buy me time. I didn't sleep. I just waited for the lawyer's office to open. By 9:03, I was sitting across from him with the document in my hands. This, he said, scanning the page, changes things. Not everything, but enough. We can file for an injunction, temporary at first, but it'll freeze any transfer activity until the court reviews the signatures. So they can't force me out? Not immediately, but we need to file fast. This is a window, not a guarantee. I left that office with something I hadn't felt in weeks, hope. But it didn't last long. When I got home, I found 3 missed calls from my son. Not my daughter, not my husband, my son. I called him back. He answered right away. "Mom," he said, already exasperated. "What are you doing?" I didn't understand the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean this whole thing. Dad said you're accusing them of theft. Of forgery? Are you serious right now?" I blinked, stunned. "You think I made this up?" He sighed like he was dealing with a toddler. "Mom, this isn't you. You've been off lately, ever since the surgery. Everyone's noticed." I could barely speak. "Off? They're worried about you. Lucy said you showed up at her house, recording things through the window. That's not normal behavior. Do you hear yourself right now?" I asked, voice shaking. "You think I'm imagining being evicted from my own house?" "Dad said you've been stressed. And maybe confused. He said the paperwork was mutual. Maybe you just forgot." Forgot. They were painting me as unstable. The woman who raised him, who sat through every fever, every college panic, every heartbreak, was now just confused. "You need to talk to someone, Mom," he said gently. "A professional. Just to rule things out. Maybe you're under more stress than you realize." I had to grip the edge of the counter to stay standing. They weren't just stealing my house. They were stealing my credibility. And my son, was helping them do it. I hung up without another word. An hour later, my daughter called. No hello, no how are you, just, "I heard what you did to Dad." My knees buckled. I sat on the kitchen floor and stared at the wall while she kept talking, repeating the same lines they must have rehearsed together. That I'd been erratic, that I'd been difficult since Harold died, that maybe I needed help. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. They had decided who I was without ever asking me. By the time I pulled myself off the floor, the phone had rung 5 more times. Different relatives, a family friend, even Lucy's sister. They were all circling the same lie. I was unstable, paranoid, emotional, which meant they were getting scared, which meant the insurance document mattered, which meant I had a shot. But I'd be walking into court already branded as the crazy woman trying to undo a deal she forgot she agreed to. That night, I went through my phone records, call logs, photos, any sign of conversations, dates, medications, texts I'd sent around the time of the forged signature. I needed to document everything. Time was not on my side anymore, because the lawyer called the next morning with news. "They've filed a counterclaim," he said, alleging elder abuse, emotional instability, that you're not of sound mind to manage your own estate. I nearly dropped the phone. "They're trying to prove I'm senile?" I whispered. He didn't respond. Because the answer was obvious. I spent the rest of that day in my garage, of all places. It wasn't strategic. I didn't have a plan. I just needed air, space, and for once, to be somewhere they hadn't touched. My garage still smelled like Harold's old wood stain. It felt untouched by lies. I sat on an overturned milk crate, surrounded by unopened boxes from 2 Christmases ago, and cried for the first time since this started. Not because they were taking my house. Because my own children didn't see me. I was a problem now. Not a mother, not a woman, just an obstacle to clear out of the way. And the worst part? They were smart enough to know that claiming, quote, elder abuse would throw everything into question. They weren't fighting me with lawyers. They were fighting me with shame. Just before sunset, I opened one of Harold's old toolboxes looking for a lighter. Don't ask me why. And that's when I found it. Stuffed inside a plastic bag with old receipts. A payment stub from the insurance company. It was dated 6 years ago. A renewal notice. Finalized and initialed in ink. Both our names listed on the policy. Margaret and Thomas Carver. Joint ownership. My hand flew to my mouth. I had already found the policy documents earlier, but this receipt was time-stamped, dated, legally notarized, and signed. It proved we were still bound financially after the alleged signature change they tried to pass off. I ran inside, scanned it, emailed it to my lawyer before the tears could blur the screen. He called within 10 minutes. "This is big," he said. "It directly conflicts with their claim. We can file a temporary injunction to freeze the power of attorney and contest the transfer of ownership." "Will that stop the eviction?" I asked. "It will delay it. That buys us time, maybe just 72 hours. But in court, time is leverage." I wasn't safe, not yet. But for the first time, I had something bigger than a suspicion or a voice recording. I had proof. We filed immediately. Emergency petition. Legal standstill. Court date set for 3 days later. 72 hours. That night, I stayed up going through everything I had. Cell phone records, texts, emails, calendar logs. I even dug up my prescription bottles from after surgery to show how out of it I'd been when they supposedly got my consent. I cataloged everything like a soldier prepping for trial, because that's what it was now. But they weren't done. The next morning, a manila envelope arrived by courier. No return address. Inside, copies of signed witness statements. They were claiming I'd been emotionally abusive, that I'd once forgotten to take my medication, that I had been erratic, unpredictable, and deteriorating rapidly. Fake. All of it. 2 of the names listed weren't even people I knew. One was a supposed nurse who had observed my decline. I'd never had in-home care. They were building a case that I wasn't fit to manage my own life. That's how they were going to win, not by proving their signatures were real, but by making me look like a confused, grieving widow who was too broken to know what she signed. My hand shook as I reread the papers. They were trying to paint me as unstable, while they quietly moved money into her business account and signed my house away like I was already gone. But I wasn't gone. I was angry now. I called my lawyer back. "We're not just freezing this," I said. "We're fighting." "Good," he replied, "because they've just filed a motion for a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation." By the time I got to my lawyer's office the next morning, I was running on coffee, adrenaline, and pure rage. Margaret Chen had already printed the motion. I read the header twice just to believe it was real. Request for psychiatric evaluation in advance of injunctive hearing. They were really doing it. They were dragging me into court, not to argue about a forged signature or illegal property transfers, but to stand up there like a confused old woman and defend my sanity. Margaret slid the packet across the table and looked at me carefully. "We can oppose it," she said, "but you need to prepare for the worst. If the judge agrees, they could delay the injunction and start the mental evaluation process immediately, which gives them more time," I said, my voice flat. She nodded. "More time to solidify the transfers, move assets, build a narrative. Once you're labeled incompetent, even temporarily, it's hard to unring that bell." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. A week ago, I was just someone's wife, someone's mom. Now I was fighting to prove I deserved my own life. We had 72 hours. That was it. Margaret gave me a list of what I'd need. Any communication proving I was lucid and managing affairs. A written timeline of events with dates. Medical records from the past 2 years. Character references. Financial records showing I still handled payments and decisions. I went home and got to work. I printed every bank transaction I had made in the last 6 months. I printed emails I'd written to my accountant, my contractor, even a plumber I'd scheduled last month. I made a list of people, former coworkers, neighbors, my friend Angela, who still ran the church donation drive. I texted all of them, asking if they'd write a statement saying I was competent, responsible, and clear-headed. Most said yes immediately. Some hesitated. One even asked, "Does this have something to do with Lucy? I don't want to get involved." That was the moment I realized. They'd already been poisoning the well. Quiet comments, casual lies, the kind that spread faster than facts ever could. I didn't have a choice anymore. I wasn't just proving my mind was intact. I was proving my whole identity hadn't been erased. That night, I backed up my phone and started recording a video diary, one for every day leading up to the hearing. Not for court, for me. Because someday, I might need to remember what it felt like to look in the mirror and know the truth, even if no one else did. The next morning, I got a voicemail from a blocked number. "Drop the injunction," the voice said. It was a man, my husband. "You're spiraling, Maggie. This is embarrassing. You're going to make things worse for yourself." I didn't cry. I downloaded the message and added it to the evidence folder. That same day, someone from my insurance company emailed me back, one of the account reps I hadn't spoken to in years. "Mrs. Carver, I'm not sure if this is what you're looking for, but I found something from a call transcript 3 months ago. It looks like someone tried to alter the beneficiary contact details, but they failed the ID verification." I stared at the email. They tried to take out the policy too. And they got sloppy. I forwarded it to Margaret. We were building a case brick by brick, but the clock was ticking. At 9:12 p.m., I got a final call that day from a number I didn't recognize. A calm voice said, "Ma'am, I've been asked to conduct your court-ordered psychiatric evaluation. We'll need to meet before the hearing." I met the psychiatrist the day before court. A small beige office tucked inside a medical plaza with piped-in classical music and a receptionist who couldn't meet my eyes. The evaluation lasted 45 minutes. He asked me where I lived, what day it was, who the current president was. I answered every question clearly, calmly, even when my hands trembled in my lap, but none of it felt real. Not the room, not the polite tone in his voice. I was a woman fighting for her house, her name, her mind, and this man was deciding, based on a checklist, whether I was still capable of living independently. Afterward, he stood to shake my hand. "I'll submit my report tomorrow morning," he said. I nodded, and as I walked out, I caught my reflection in the glass door. Tired, pale, but not broken, not yet. Court was the next day. I wore a charcoal blazer I hadn't touched since Harold's funeral. It was the last thing I had that still made me feel grounded, like someone who could sit across from a judge and be taken seriously. Margaret met me outside the courthouse. "You look strong," she said, giving my hand a squeeze. I didn't feel strong. The hearing was held in a small courtroom, nothing like what you see in movies. No jury. Just a judge, a clerk, and rows of cold wooden benches. My husband was already inside. So was Lucy. They didn't look at me. They didn't have to. They had a table full of papers, binders, and, what made my stomach drop, 2 women in medical scrubs sitting quietly behind them. Margaret leaned in. They brought in fake nurses. What? I don't recognize either of them from the case filings. But I guarantee they're here to testify you've been mentally declining. It's a show. Be ready. I nodded slowly, then took my seat. The judge entered, adjusted his glasses, and got right to it. Their attorney spoke first. Calm, confident, rehearsed. He said my behavior had become erratic since my husband's surgery last year. He never had surgery. That I had missed payments, become confused about dates, and lacked stability in key decision-making areas. Then they called the first nurse. I recognized her instantly. She used to work at Lucy's old clinic. She looked down when she took the stand. She claimed to have seen me struggle with memory, that I once forgot what day it was during a wellness check, and that concerns had been raised. I could barely breathe. They were fabricating a whole version of me, a fragile, confused woman with no grip on reality. When it was our turn, Margaret stood. She listed every bank transaction I had made that month, every email. She showed my calendar, my tax filing. She played a short clip from my video diary. Then she brought up the insurance documents, the binding joint policy, the forged signature, the time-stamped receipt. And still, I could feel the room resisting me. The judge furrowed his brow. He asked more questions about my mental state than about the forged documents. And when he spoke again, I felt my heart sink. Due to the conflicting testimony, he said, I'm ordering a formal psychiatric review to be completed within the next 7 days. We will postpone a ruling on the injunction until then. Postpone. No ruling. No freeze. More time for them to keep moving pieces behind the scenes. As we walked out of the courtroom, I kept my eyes forward, past Lucy's smug expression, past my husband's silence. Outside, I finally let my legs give out, sat on the courthouse steps like I was catching my breath after being shoved underwater. Margaret sat beside me. I passed their test, I said. I passed. Why wasn't that enough? She didn't answer right away. Then she said, because they're not trying to prove you're crazy. They're trying to make you look that way long enough to finish what they started. I looked up at the sky, gray and thick with clouds, and felt the rage begin to harden. This wasn't just a betrayal anymore. This was a conspiracy. And if they wanted to tear me down quietly, they should have picked someone who didn't know how to fight dirty. The next morning, I checked into the clinic under a different name. It wasn't illegal. I didn't lie about who I was, but I gave them my middle name, signed in as Anne, and listed my address as the P.O. box I'd opened last week. I just wanted to sit in the waiting room, to watch. This was the same place Lucy used to work before she married into our family. A rehab facility with a sparkling reputation and a slick brochure that used words like wellness, compassion, and holistic trust management. Sounded noble. But I wasn't here for a consultation. I was here to find a ghost. Because Margaret had done some digging after court. And what she found was this. One of the women who testified in court, the nurse who said, I forgot what day it was. She used to work here, briefly, until she was fired. There wasn't much on paper, but a quiet email from a former administrator said it all. Lucy vouched for her, got her hired. There was a problem with meds and patient access. We let her go, quietly. Now I needed more. So I waited. I sat in the soft beige chair, clutching a fake clipboard, pretending to fill out an intake form while the receptionist gossiped loudly on the phone behind her glass wall. And then I saw her, not Lucy, her, the nurse, wearing street clothes, no uniform. She came out of the staff hallway with a folder in her arms and looked like she hadn't slept in days. I waited until she stepped outside, then followed her. I called out her name once we hit the sidewalk. She turned around fast, ready to lie or run, until she saw my face. Mrs. Carver, she said quietly. I nodded. You know who I am. Good. She looked around. I don't want trouble. You already gave me trouble, I said, stepping closer. When you sat in court and told a judge I was losing my mind. She swallowed hard. I didn't want to be there. Lucy, she offered money. She said it was just verifying behavior. She made it sound small. You lied under oath, I said. She looked like she might cry. She did this to her own grandmother, she said suddenly. Same game. Back then it was a trust account. Got herself appointed guardian. Moved the money into her own business. When I questioned it, she threatened to report me for, quote, violating privacy. That's why I left. I felt something crack open in my chest. Not pain this time. Possibility. Would you be willing to testify? I asked, truthfully. Not for her, for me. She hesitated, but then she nodded. If I can get protection, yes. That night, I called Margaret, told her everything. This could blow it open, she said. If we get her statement on record and her HR file from the clinic, it puts Lucy's whole pattern into question. I sat on my couch, holding the phone to my ear with one hand and my video diary in the other. I'm not afraid of them anymore, I told the camera. They wanted me to unravel. And for a second, I almost did. But I'm still here, still clear, and I'm about to make them regret underestimating me. It wasn't over. But I had something I hadn't had in weeks. Leverage. And as I drifted off to sleep, my phone buzzed. A notification from my bank. New transaction. $12,300. Transferred from joint account to an unfamiliar business account. Lucy's business. My husband's name on the signature line. I didn't sleep much after the bank alert. $12,300. Gone. Transferred out of our joint account into a business account I'd never seen. It wasn't just the money. It was the message. They weren't even hiding it anymore. The name on the transaction, Harmony Wellness Group. I looked it up. Heart pounding. A boutique spa. New signage. New website. New branding. And on the lease paperwork Margaret pulled, my husband's name, co-signer. He was bankrolling Lucy's business with my money. While I was sitting in court, defending my mental health, they were out there building a life. On the ashes of mine, I forwarded everything to Margaret. She called back 30 minutes later. The spa is under Lucy's name, but the funding trails back to your shared marital account. That's financial abuse. We might be able to file a fraud claim, but it won't matter if I'm declared mentally incompetent, I replied. Silence. Then she said, we need more than bank records. We need a pattern, a history of this. You said she pulled something similar with her grandmother? She did, I said. And the nurse who told me that used to work at Ridgeway. That's the assisted living center just outside town, right? I nodded. And that's how I found myself in a gray volunteer smock 2 days later, walking the halls of Ridgeway Retirement Center like I belonged. It wasn't a trick. I signed up for real. They needed help with arts and crafts hour. I needed access. Lucy had worked there 3 years ago, left suddenly. No explanation. But rumors I'd heard still lingered. The second afternoon I was there, a woman named Gloria approached me. Mid-50s, sharp as a whip, used to run intake before retiring early due to a back injury. She looked me up and down and said, "You're not here for the crafts, are you?" I smiled. "No, I'm looking for someone who used to work with Lucy Taylor." Her face changed. We sat on the back porch while residents played cards nearby. Gloria lit a cigarette and stared into the trees before she spoke. She was charming, she said. Knew how to smile just right when the families came in, but she was always asking odd questions. Who had money? Who didn't have visitors? That kind of thing. I listened carefully. One woman, Alice, had early-stage dementia. Lucy started managing her appointments, said she was helping. Then suddenly, Alice's niece couldn't access her accounts. Legal mess. We never proved anything, but Lucy resigned the next day. "Would you talk to my lawyer?" I asked. Gloria nodded. "I kept copies. HR never took them. She messed with the wrong person's aunt. I've been waiting for someone to come asking." That night, I sent Gloria's scan statements to Margaret. She called me 5 minutes later. "This is it," she said. "We now have evidence Lucy's done this before, and that she targets vulnerable people. It blows up their credibility." I hung up and sat in my car for a while, just breathing. One part of me wanted to collapse into the seat and scream until my throat bled. But another part, the part that survived betrayal, eviction, and courtroom humiliation, was calm. Because this wasn't just about my house anymore. This was about stopping her, before she did it to someone else. Again. And that night, as I went through one more folder of old joint account statements, I found it. A line of transfers going back months, each one small enough not to raise flags, but all leading to Lucy, all from our savings. By the time I walked into the bank, I had already counted 17 transfers. Some were just $300. Others hit 5 digits, but they all followed the same pattern: subtle, spaced apart, and carefully routed through sub-accounts I never touched. I asked to speak to the branch manager. "Joint account verification," I said calmly, like I wasn't vibrating inside. "I'm looking into some irregular activity." He brought me into a glass-walled room and pulled up the account. I handed him a folder with the transaction list I had printed and highlighted. "I didn't authorize any of these," I said. He clicked, scrolled, then stopped. "They were approved via online access," he said. "I don't use online banking," I replied. "Never have." That was always his thing. He frowned. "The login used matches your husband's credentials. But 1 second." He tapped something on his keyboard and pulled up the business account tied to the transfers. "Business owner, Harmony Wellness Group," he read aloud. "Account opened 6 months ago, funded primarily by deposits from your joint savings." He paused. "Co-signer, Thomas Carver." I stared at him, trying to swallow the wave that rose in my throat. They didn't even try to hide it. My husband had opened an account with Lucy, funded her spa, paid for renovations, digital ads, even a private consulting coach, all with money that came from me. But here's what hit hardest. It started months ago, long before the forged will, long before the surgery, long before I even knew something was wrong. They'd been planning this long before I felt the first crack. "Can you print all of this?" I asked. "Everything?" "Everything." I walked out of that bank with a stack of paperwork I could barely hold in one hand. I drove straight to Margaret's office. I didn't call ahead. I just walked in, dropped the file onto her desk and sat down. She flipped through it slowly. Her eyes widened. Then she sat back in her chair. "This is it," she said. "This is full-blown financial fraud. It wasn't just about the house. They laundered money into a business that shouldn't even exist yet. And you—" "I never authorized a single transfer," I interrupted. "Not one. I never saw a receipt. Never got a notification. He took everything behind my back." She nodded. "We're filing immediately. Fraud, misappropriation, breach of marital trust, emotional abuse. You're not just defending yourself anymore, Margaret. You're going on offense." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not from fear, from relief. Because finally, after all the gaslighting, the fake nurses, the whispered lies about my mind, I had something they couldn't spin. A paper trail. Signed, dated, admissible, and criminal. "I want it public," I said quietly. "No settlements, no quiet resolution. I want it in front of a judge." Margaret met my eyes and smiled for the first time since this started. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." That night, I packed up every folder I had, every receipt, every transcript, every voicemail, every file from the clinic. I labeled them neatly, color-coded them by category. And I slept, really slept, for the first time in weeks. But in the morning, I made a decision I hadn't let myself even think about until that moment. I pulled out my grandson's birthday invitation from the bottom drawer. I was going, uninvited or not. I needed to see the people who had stayed silent and remind them that I was still standing. I hadn't been to my son's house in over a year. Not since the incident Lucy twisted into a family scandal. Not since my daughter told me I needed help and my son looked through me like I was a ghost in his living room. But when I held that birthday invitation in my hand, creased, unofficial, printed on glossy cardstock like an afterthought, I knew I had to go, even if they didn't want me there. Even if no one acknowledged I was invited. This wasn't about cake or balloons. This was about showing up. About making sure my grandson saw me, really saw me, before they rewrote me out of his life completely. I dressed simply. A light blue sweater, black slacks. I wore a pair of pearl earrings Harold gave me on our 10th anniversary. And I brought the gift I'd picked out months ago, a telescope, wrapped in silver paper with constellations printed on it. He'd once told me he wanted to see Saturn. I parked 2 blocks away and walked. My stomach twisted the closer I got. Laughter floated from the backyard. Dozens of people, music, squeals of kids in the bouncy house. I slipped through the side gate and stepped into a scene that might as well have been a movie set. tiki torches, a cupcake tower, matching space explorer decorations, and them. My husband stood at the patio bar, pouring drinks like he belonged there. Lucy beside him, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm like it had always been hers. They were the center of the story now. And me? No one even looked twice. My daughter saw me first. She froze mid-sentence, then turned away like she hadn't. I kept walking, smiling at children I didn't know, nodding politely at adults who avoided eye contact. I spotted my grandson near the porch, sitting cross-legged on the lawn, tugging at a balloon string. I walked up slowly, knelt down beside him, and said, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." He looked up, startled, then smiled. A soft one. "Grandma," he whispered. I handed him the telescope box. "I thought you might like this." Before he could answer, Lucy's voice sliced through the music. "She's not on the list," she said sharply from across the yard. "This is a private event." Heads turned. Silence rippled. My husband stepped forward, not running, smiling. "Maggie," he said gently, "let's not make this awkward." I stared at him, at the man who forged my signature, emptied my account, called me crazy behind closed doors. And I realized something. They weren't hiding anymore. This wasn't a secret. This was a show. He put his hand on Lucy's back and leaned in to kiss her cheek. It was quick, but it was enough. Enough to make the air leave my lungs. Enough to break something that had already been cracking for weeks. My hands were shaking, but I didn't drop the gift. I turned to my grandson and said, "I love you, no matter what they say. Always." He looked confused. Then, quietly, he said, "Mom says you're not coming back." I stood, held in my breath, and walked. No one stopped me. No one asked me to stay. I passed a table of gifts as I left, brightly wrapped, expensive, flashy. Mine was never added, just left in the grass, forgotten. That night, I called Margaret. "File it," I said. Everything. The fraud, the theft, the abuse. I want it all in front of a judge. And for the first time, I meant it with no hesitation. Because now I wasn't fighting to go back. I was fighting to burn the whole lie down. I didn't cry after the party. I didn't drink, didn't scream, didn't even talk to anyone for 2 full days. I just worked. I organized everything. Receipts, emails, statements, recordings, witness names, medical files, even the video of Lucy kissing my husband while I stood 30 feet away, holding a birthday gift like a damn outsider. Then I walked into Margaret's office and dropped it all onto her desk like a war offering. She opened the folder, browsed the contents, then looked up at me. "You're sure?" More than ever, she filed the complaint that same day. Fraud, financial abuse, forgery, emotional manipulation, property theft. My name was back on the front page of something, for the right reason this time. And then things moved fast. The court accepted the case within 48 hours. The judge assigned wasn't the same one from the psychiatric hearing. Thank God. Margaret and I requested a trial date. We waived any settlement talk, but Lucy didn't. She panicked. It started with a phone call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. "Margaret, this is all gotten out of hand," Lucy's voice said. "We can settle. Quietly. We'll return some of the funds. I can even help you relocate. You deserve peace." Peace? She thought I was still looking for comfort. She didn't realize I was now after justice. The next day, Margaret got a call from their attorney offering a settlement package, 20% of the house sale value, a confidentiality clause, no formal admission of guilt, and a public statement that differences had been resolved amicably. I laughed out loud when I read it. "Is that supposed to fix everything?" I asked. "A payout and silence?" Margaret didn't even blink. I already declined it. "Good," I said. Because this wasn't about peace. It was about the truth. The courtroom date was locked for the following week. 1 full day. Testimonies, recordings, documents, everything would be on display. We prepared relentlessly. Gloria submitted her statement from Ridgeway. The fake nurse from court was subpoenaed, and that fired HR administrator from Lucy's clinic? She was willing to testify too. Lucy's perfect world, the house, the spa, the fake family, was about to be exposed brick by brick. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, no contact, no emotion. But the messages didn't stop. My daughter texted, "Do you really have to drag everyone into court?" My son called once, just once, and left a voice message saying, "Please don't make this worse than it already is." I didn't reply, because I wasn't the one who made it worse. They did. They made it unbearable. The night before the trial, I sat on my couch, holding the final printout of my testimony. My hands didn't shake anymore. I looked at the pages and thought, let them hear me. All of it. I wasn't going to beg them to believe me. I was going to show them. It was strange how calm the courthouse looked that morning. From the outside, you'd never guess lives were about to be split wide open inside. There were birds in the parking lot. Someone laughed in the hallway. For everyone else, it was just another Wednesday. But for me, it was Judgment Day. Margaret and I walked in early. The courtroom was small but full. Somehow word had spread about the family, the fraud, the lawsuit. A few familiar faces from the community sat quietly in the back rows, watching, whispering. Lucy walked in 10 minutes late, full makeup, sharp suit, her posture stiff, like a woman who thought she still had control of the narrative. My husband followed right behind her, carrying her purse like he was her assistant now. He didn't look at me. Good. I wasn't here for him anymore. The judge entered. We rose. And then it began, opening arguments. Margaret spoke first, clear, focused, steady. She laid out the case, forged signatures, financial abuse, exploitation, mental manipulation, false testimony, prior fraud history. The opposing attorney tried to flip the story, claimed it was a family dispute taken tragically public, that I was lashing out after a decline in health and a misunderstanding over paperwork. I clenched my fists under the table. Misunderstanding? I had the papers, the witnesses, the voice recording. And now I had a voice. When they called me to the stand, my legs were stiff. My throat was dry. But I walked. Not because I was brave. Because I didn't want to ever feel powerless in front of these people again. The oath felt heavier than I expected. I sat, looked at the jury, then at the judge. And I told everything. From the surgery to the fake concern, the eviction, the daughter-in-law whispering, "She'll be out of the picture soon." My son calling me unstable, the nurse who lied, the spa business, the bank theft, the birthday party. I told the truth like it had weight, like every word added another brick to the wall I was building between me and what they did to me. Halfway through, Margaret stood and played the audio, that recording, the one from Lucy's kitchen window, their laughter, his voice, the plans, the forged documents. Then Lucy's words, "Once the house is in my name, we won't need her." It echoed in the courtroom like a slap. I looked at my husband for the first time that day. He went completely pale. He had the audacity to look ashamed. Good. The judge's face was unreadable, but the courtroom was quiet. No shifting, no fake coughs. No one laughed this time. When I stepped down from the stand, Margaret touched my elbow. Just briefly, just enough. I sat back down. I didn't cry. But my hands, they didn't shake anymore. The next morning, I stood outside the courthouse, watching the sky turn from gray to gold, breathing in the air like it meant something. Because I felt it now. The shift. Something had cracked in that courtroom yesterday. Maybe it was Lucy's mask. Maybe it was my husband's silence. Maybe it was just the sound of my own voice. Uninterrupted, undeniable. Whatever it was, today felt different. Inside, the final testimonies began. Margaret called Gloria first, the former intake worker from Ridgeway. She spoke with steady, careful clarity, detailing the patterns Lucy followed with elderly patients. She always picked the ones without family, Gloria said, or the ones with confused records, quiet ones, easy to isolate. Then came the fired nurse, pale but composed, hands folded tightly in her lap. "She threatened me," she said. Told me if I didn't help her manage her mother-in-law, she'd report me for negligence. I didn't know she'd actually use my statement in court. I never saw Mrs. Carver struggle mentally. Not once. And then Margaret laid it out with the timeline. The day of my surgery, the forged power of attorney, the bank transfers, the business registration, the lease agreement, my husband's signature on every dotted line. The courtroom wasn't quiet this time. People whispered, heads turned, and I saw it, the jury shifting in their seats. One woman wiped her eye, another scribbled something furiously. A man in the front row narrowed his eyes and stared at Lucy, like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Lucy was unraveling in real time. Her lawyer whispered nonstop into her ear. She didn't smile anymore. She kept pulling at her sleeves, like the fabric was choking her. Then it happened. The judge asked for a short recess. 15 minutes. I stepped out into the hallway, needing air, but I didn't get far. My husband was already there, leaning against the far wall, looking hollow. He straightened when he saw me, took a few steps forward. No lawyers, no Lucy, just him. "Margaret," he said quietly. I said nothing. I never meant for it to get this far. You have to believe that. I stared at him. He looked smaller now, not in size, but in presence. Like the man I'd spent 34 years with had deflated right in front of me. "You signed everything," I said, my voice flat. "You watched them lie about my mind, about who I was." "I was scared," he replied. "She said you were going to leave me, that you'd—" "Don't," I cut in. "Don't pretend this happened to you. You chose this." He looked down. Couldn't meet my eyes anymore. I stepped past him. He reached out, gently, pathetically, like he might touch my arm. I didn't stop. I walked back into the courtroom and sat in my chair. I heard him behind me, still standing, still trying to decide whether to speak again. But I never looked back. The courtroom smelled like paper and nerves. It was the third day of trial. We all knew it wouldn't go longer. The evidence had landed hard, the testimonies even harder. And yet, I sat frozen in my seat, like the floor might drop out from under me. The judge entered. No jury in this kind of case. Just him. Just us. Just the truth. His face didn't show anything. Not sympathy, not anger. Just a tired man in a black robe, holding the weight of our mess in his hands. He began to speak. After reviewing the presented evidence, including financial records, witness testimony, and audio recordings, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Margaret Carver. I didn't move. I heard it. I registered it. But I couldn't feel it yet. The court rules that the power of attorney was obtained through fraudulent means. The forged documents are hereby nullified. Full ownership of the primary residence reverts to Mrs. Carver. My fingers grip the edge of the table. The court further finds evidence of financial misconduct and emotional abuse. Damages in the amount of $213,000 are awarded to the plaintiff. That was the moment my body finally caught up to my brain. Not joy, not even relief, just breath. I could finally breathe again, but not for long. Behind me, I heard the scrape of a chair, then another. My husband stood, and in front of everyone, his lawyer, Lucy, the judge, he snapped. "This is bull duels," he yelled. "She's twisting everything." The judge raised a hand. "Sir, she was always cold, always difficult. Lucy gave me something I hadn't had in years. Attention, purpose. She actually listened to me." A gasp rippled through the gallery. Lucy turned toward him, her face draining. "Don't drag me into this," she hissed. "You dragged me in," he barked. "You said you could handle it. You said she'd never fight back." Court officers moved in fast. My husband was now pointing at me. "You let everything rot, Margaret. You were checked out years ago. I only signed the papers because you made me feel invisible." I stood slowly, not to speak, just to look him in the eyes one last time. "You could have left me," I said calmly. "You didn't have to erase me." The judge banged the gavel. "Remove him." The officers took his arms. He didn't resist. Not physically. But his face, his twisted, flushed, panicked face, looked like a man watching his life crumble, brick by brick, and realizing he was the one who lit the match. Lucy didn't follow him out. She just stood there, alone. When court adjourned, people gathered around me. Margaret, Gloria, even one of the juror clerks. Kind words. Nods of respect. But I didn't hear most of it. All I could think about was my front door, and what it would feel like to put my key in it again, legally, finally rightfully mine. That afternoon, I stood on my porch, holding the key in my palm, and when I stepped inside, nothing felt the same. Not because anything was broken, but because now I knew the truth had been hiding behind every wall, every cabinet, every room I once called safe. And as I walked through the house, I noticed the mail still piled near the door. On top was a letter, no stamp, handwritten. I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a drawing, a small rocket ship, and in the corner, a note in blocky pencil. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I know what they did. Liam, thanks so much for watching." If this story hit home or reminded you of something you've been through, share your thoughts below. I read every single one. And let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the next video.